healthy doses of novelty are required to build a lifelong intimate marriage. So, if you're both curious and want to try it, I say go for it. From my understanding, the scriptures are very clear about the context in which sexual activity is to happen, but leaves a lot of blank canvas as to how that sexuality is to be expressed between a couple. Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. Hello, everyone. In October, we're hosting our next in-person marriage retreat. This is ideal for couples that are in otherwise happy marriages, but wish things were better in the intimacy department, if you know what I mean. Our retreats are absolutely not boring and nothing like being in a stuffy hotel conference room. This is a vacation, a getaway for you and your spouse, where you get to work with me and my team to do a deep dive into your marriage relationship. Our retreats are squeaky clean, by the way. No nudity, no demonstrations, nothing like that. And no one is asked to work through their issues in front of the group either. We really respect your privacy. And because it's set up this way, it's a place where you can actually talk about things that are important to you and important aspects of your marriage and make real progress. But you don't have to just take my word for it. I invite you to check out the many interviews of past retreat attendees on my website describing what their experience at the retreat was like. I'm very excited about today's episode. Today we get to address a lot of juicy topics, such as a reluctant wife feeling pressure to give her husband a hand job, a couple that wants to try pegging but is unsure about it, a frustrated wife that feels like all the effort she's making to improve her marriage is one-sided and feels a lot of pain because of that. A husband shares that the pain of being in a low intimacy marriage where you either fight about sex or have none at all and he's tired of it. A couple asks about using penis rings. A frustrated wife whose husband is only interested in sex if he's the one initiating, and unfortunately it's really infrequent. A discouraged wife that must resort to using a vibrator in order to orgasm, where penetrative, manual, or oral stimulation is preferred. These are real questions on the hearts of many of you listeners, and I am humbled that you would trust me with your most perplexing questions relating to sexual intimacy in your marriage. I'm on a mission to help you have the very best sexual and intimate marriage possible, and I hope that the discussion today spurs deeper conversations within you and your marriage. If you have a question you'd like to submit anonymously for me to address in a future podcast episode, go to Get Your Marriage On, click on Resources, and then Anonymous Questions, and that comes straight to me. All right, the first sets of questions have to do with hand jobs, and I don't know why, but I received a lot of questions about hand jobs recently, so this must be on your mind, so let's go there. Okay, the first comes from a wife. She says, are hand jobs frequent in most marriages? My husband said July 21st is National Hand Job Day, hint, hint, which to me translates to me getting a sore arm and semen all over me. And those are real issues. How can we make hand jobs easier? And then I got this email from a husband. He says, thank you for your blog. My wife is reluctant to give hand jobs sometimes. How can I encourage her and make them easier for her and make her say yes more often? These are great questions. First thing I want to address is the idea of entitlement. No one deserves a hand job. No one earns or has the right to demand a hand job of their spouse, no matter what this made-up July 21st holiday says. Entitlement is a real intimacy and passion killer in marriages. When one person feels entitled to sex or they feel superior because they have quote-unquote sexual needs that need to be met, it's a recipe for having a lot of difficulty in your sexual relationship down the road. So first of all, you need to watch out for that. The lady asked how frequent are hand jobs in marriages, and frankly, I have no data on how frequent hand jobs are in marriage. But if I had that data, I think it would be pointless for you if you really don't want to do it. If you're not motivated to try it, any amount of data probably won't persuade you one way or the other. In fact, it just might make you feel worse about it. When it comes to maturing in your sexual relationship and progressing from a stage 2 to a stage 3 sexual relationship, like I talk about often on this podcast, we really need to move out of the should mind frame and into the I choose frame. Meaning, if you feel resentful, that's a sign that you're living in the should and not in the I choose frame. Let me give you an example. The choose frame might be, you know what, I really don't like giving hand jobs, but I love this person, and this person matters a lot to me, and hand jobs matter a lot to him. I may not be in the mood to do this all the time, but I could probably do a little bit under certain circumstances, or I could probably do a little bit, maybe not all the way to climax, but I can do about that much, and I'll do it as a gift. This is something I can really get behind and I choose to participate in. Do you see how that frame of thinking is very different than, I have to do it, or he's going to get moody? In the former case, you're choosing, like, I am an agent in this matter. This is what I am going to do, and these are the reasons why it matters to me. Versus the other one, you feel like the choice is taken from you, and you're operating in a should or shouldn't kind of a frame. And that's really important. Here's another example in the I choose frame, but from a different angle. And it might be like this for you. You know, I really love my husband, and I love him so much I don't want to resent him. If I give in to his request and I give him the hand job he wants, I'm going to resent him. And I don't want to be in a relationship with someone I resent. We'll both need to tolerate the discomfort of an unfulfilled sexual desire, but I choose that over engaging in something that I'm just going to resent later. Do you see how it's still in the I choose frame, but it's different than a I should or I shouldn't, like I have to kind of a frame? That's really important, that whatever you do, you kind of take control, take charge of what you can and can't do, and make it your choice. Now, for the other partner that wants the hand job, that means you got to put up with some disappointment time to time. But you're married for the long haul, right? Even though this might be really important to you, what probably is most important to you, that you're in a loving relationship with someone that you really like, and you just bring more honesty to the table. Just because one of you wants it doesn't automatically mean it's a yes. It doesn't automatically mean it's a no either. This is like the crucible. This is the opportunities that refine you in your marriage relationship to create something new and better out of both of you than you could have done if you weren't married or you tried to go at it alone. This is one of the ways that marriage sharpens, it's the iron sharpening iron. It really rounds you out. Now, I have a few more tips. For the reluctant wife, you can choose your limits. You don't need to go until he ejaculates if semen really bothers you. And remember, for a lot of people, arousal feels great, just for arousal's sake. Let's go for arousal here, not for orgasm. Now, if you want to do it and you just need some real helpful tips, I've got a few tips for you. Men, on the receiving side, first of all, you need to do away with entitlement and see this hand job for exactly what it is. It's a gift, so be gracious and receive it. Women, on the receiving side, you're about to rock his world. So, tie up your hair or whatever you do, don some lingerie, own your sexiness, and think about the incredible power you wield in your hands as he places one of the most vulnerable parts of him into your very capable hands. Think about the power you have in this situation. If you're concerned about messes, now hand jobs are messy. You use a lot of lubricant sometimes, and of course semen gets all over the place and can get sticky. So one solution could be to use a condom. But let me give you a pro tip here. What you want to do is unroll the condom partway and drizzle water-based lubricant inside the condom first. Now it's important that it's water-based because water-based lubricants are compatible with condoms. And then you put the condom on him. Having lube on the inside of the condom makes it feel way better for him. And by the way, the Intimately Us app has a section all about hand jobs and various techniques you can try. Let me just give you one of them. Use both hands. Vary the speed and tempo. Tease him. Make eye contact. Ask him to bone for you. Use flirty language and fondle him and massage him. Just enjoy the power position that you're in. Now, if you decide to stop before he climaxes, a kind way to bring some sort of closure to the experience for him is to squeeze the tip really, really hard just for a few moments. Imagine in your mind's eye what you're doing is you're channeling all the sexual energy that wants to get out of him from the tip of the penis. You're going to squeeze and push all that sexual energy from the tip of the penis down the shaft and into his body like a battery, and he's going to store it for later. Here's the second question. It's about pegging. This person says, I love y'all's content. Our marriage is coming out of a sexually rocky patch, and I believe y'all have helped. I am a husband who is very sexual, surprise, surprise, and I'm very into exploration. This has led me to internal prostate stimulation. I would like to try pegging if my wife wants to and does not feel convicted against it. I am curious but unsure about it. Is a role reversal and active pegging past boundaries? I can't find a scriptural reason for it to be off limits, especially as the prostate seems to be a great sexual tool and one for male health as well. Thank you for that great question. And as I help couples with their sex lives, I've found this following skill to be really helpful. I call it the don't yuck another person's yum. So I'm about to describe the sex act called pegging. I'm assuming some of you may not know what this person's talking about, so I want to describe it to you. Now, some of you listening, as I describe this, might sense a strong disgust reaction. Others are like, oh, gross. Who wants to do that, right? That's the disgust reaction you're going to have. Others listening to this might be very intrigued. You're going to sit up a little taller and lean in, like, this sounds like an exciting idea to you. Whatever it is, I encourage you to try the don't yuck another person's yum skill. And what you do is you just notice the blend of emotions that come up when you hear about different sexual acts and behaviors and things people want to try. Now, it's the skill of noticing feelings without judgment or reacting to them. That's the key. And in fact, this skill is helpful not just about sex acts, but it helps in raising teenage children, dealing with difficult people in the PTA, and handling stressful situations at work or in the home. Okay, pegging is when she wears a harness designed for women where she can attach a fake penis or dildo. In effect, it lets her sport an erect penis. So she then uses the dildo that's strapped onto her body to do him, usually by penetrating his anus to stimulate his prostate. A lot of couples don't realize that stimulating his prostate is very pleasurable for him. We have an article about this in the Intimatelyist app if you're curious to learn more. The idea of pegging, by the way, is very erotic for a lot of men because it's a role reversal, right? So many men are used to be the ones doing the doing, and it's actually really exciting just to be done for a change. Now, for the second half of this person's question, is role reversal and pegging past boundaries? Frankly, I'm really neutral on this. I look at it like money. I ask you, is money good or evil? How would you answer that question? Probably you'd say it's neither good or evil, it just depends on how you spend it. Exactly. You can also tell a tree by its fruits, right? That's what Jesus teaches in the Sermon on the Mount. One purpose of good sex, in my opinion, is to strengthen the marriage. And there's something really bonding about really good sex. A great sex life involves trying new things. It's really important. Healthy doses of novelty are required to build a lifelong intimate marriage. So, if you're both curious and want to try it, I say go for it. Then see if it yields good fruit for your marriage. And if it's good fruit, then you know that the tree is good, so to speak. From my understanding, the scriptures are very clear about the context in which sexual activity is to happen, but leaves a lot of blank canvas as to how that sexuality is to be expressed between a man and a woman, between the couple. And I talked about this at length in my podcast episode 2 weeks ago. You can refer to that one. All right, this next question comes from a wife, and she's frustrated about the one-sided efforts for good sex in her marriage. This is what she says. I feel like I'm the only one in our relationship that wants to strengthen it. Like, let's read relationship books so we can have better communication in a relationship. Or let's go on interesting dates, not just dinner and a movie. And let's listen to the Get Your Marriage On podcast about having a better sex life. He doesn't initiate any of these and isn't interested in it either. Our sex life stinks, and so does our physical affection towards each other. We've been married 21 years and have 5 kiddos, and it's been like this the whole time. I want our kids to see a loving relationship. It seems when I stop giving affection, it stops in general. I'm getting resentful, and I don't want to talk at all to him sometimes. I just want to give up. In all this, I feel totally selfish too. Like it's all about me, and I don't want that, but I don't get much feedback from my husband, so I don't know what to do. What advice would you have for us? Thank you for this question. First of all, I encourage you to watch the free training I did last week about this very thing. You can find the free training on my website at getyourmarriageon.com and then click on free masterclass. For an hour, I do a deep dive on this very topic. Secondly, I encourage you to join our Get Your Marriage On program, and I'll link that in the show notes. You are exactly who this program is designed for. You see, there's real pain that comes with mismatched desires, mismatched sex drives, and levels of affection, preferences, etc. in a marriage. And this pain is real. And I have a lot of compassion for you. And you're definitely not alone in feeling this pain. Many, many, many couples listening to this podcast and otherwise have this kind of pain running in their marriage. And I have about 100 things I can say about this in your situation that I don't have the time for. But let me give you just a few thoughts. I want to ask you, how much of your mental and emotional energy are you putting in towards trying to change him or managing him so that he would be more affectionate towards you? What if you could channel all that energy into being a better version of yourself instead in this relationship? Wouldn't that feel a lot easier, a lot less anxious? What would happen if you honestly expressed what your experience is like in this relationship with him and all the hurt you feel? Just lay it all out on the table. Not to accuse him, not to blame him, but to be really transparent and let him know what hurt you've been hiding. What aspects do you both tend to hide or pretend aren't there in your relationship because it's more convenient not to address? But as a result of not addressing these important things, you live less authentically towards each other. Another question is, are you a safe person for him to open up to? Does he sense your judgment and critique, making it difficult for him to be himself around you, including his flawed nature? I have a story from a couple on my podcast. They were Darcy and Zach Spafford. And they were in a marriage situation where Zach turned to pornography when he was really stressed. And his wife had a very strong reaction against his pornography use. And so he kept it secret. And he would come home with other problems too, like work stress or things that were bothering him about other aspects of life. And his wife just told him to suck it up, like, don't complain. Like, she didn't want to hear his complaints. She didn't want to share his burdens with him. She wanted him to, quote unquote, be strong and handle it all on his own. Well, he felt very lonely. And one outlet that worked for him was using pornography. Because in the few minutes he was using pornography, he felt great. He felt, powerful. He felt loved and desired. Even though really he felt a lot of shame from using the pornography. He knew it wasn't great. And it was doubly shameful, especially when his wife got really upset at his usage of it. Now, the point of this isn't about pornography, but the point of it is this. One night, Darcy shares this story about she woke up in the middle of the night to find her husband sitting up in bed, and he's on his phone scrolling through a movie, trying to find like the sexy scene inside of a movie. He was looking for a sexy scene. And instead of reacting so upset like she would normally do in that moment, for a moment she got a glimpse of this man who has a lot of burdens, who's really stressed, and who's really lonely. And, poor guy that dealing with all this, he chooses to look at pornography to deal with the stress. And it made her realize that she wasn't a safe person for him to open up to. In that moment, she decided to change her approach. So instead, she invited him to share your stress, share your burdens with me. And he was really reluctant at first. But she became a better partner, and that was part of her half. Now, there's a lot more to the story you can hear about in the full episode. But the part that stood out to me is she became a safe person for him to open up to. And as she became more safe for him to open up to, it did away with her constant critique of him. It did away with her constant judgment of him. And they could actually start moving forward now with the things that were affecting both of them in their relationship. And now they have a much better marriage as a result. So the point is, ask yourself, am I okay with his flawed nature? Can he be himself around me? Or am I full of judgment and critique constantly about what I'm not getting, what I should deserve in my marriage that he's not providing, and he's a lousy provider for it, right? There's a very different energy there. Can you get curious and be genuinely interested in his interests, what he thinks about, what makes him tick? Not to manipulate him, but is there more depth to him than you may have noticed before? I also want to reiterate that it's never selfish to desire a stronger marriage. it's never selfish to desire that your kids have a better model of affection. So your desires there are not selfish. I think this is a situation for you where coaching can be very, very effective and helpful. Reach out for a free consultation. The next question is kind of similar, but from a husband's perspective. This is about where they argue about sex all the time and he just feels like it's not worth it. This is what he says. My wife is a low desire spouse and I am the very high desire spouse in our marriage. My wife and I seem to always have an argument every other week about sex and intimacy in our marriage because one of us is frustrated by the other for either wanting it or not wanting sex, and one of us is either putting forth the effort or not to try to put forth effort to be intimate. There's a lot of resistance here. It's left me feeling very defeated. I am so tired of the regular arguments about the same thing over and over. It's gotten to the point where I would just rather agree with my wife to have a sexless marriage than actually put forth effort to have nothing improve and argue over sex constantly. What can I do to not feel this way and help my wife and I to not have constant arguments about sex and intimacy in our marriage? Well, welcome to real life. This scenario plays out in so many marriages everywhere. You're definitely not alone. Just because it's normal, though, doesn't mean it's optimal. I understand there's a lot of real pain here. It's real. It hurts a lot to be with someone that you want to touch, whom you hope wants to touch you, and they don't want you. It's hard to want to be wanted and the other person doesn't put forth that effort. It's hard to be married to someone because implicit in marriage is sexual exclusivity, not celibacy, right? It's painful just not to be wanted by someone who you're very close to, who matters a lot to you and love, yet you don't feel that same coming back to you. I did a live masterclass on this topic last week. You can go back to my website at getyourmarriageon.com, click on masterclass to watch the recording. I then want to encourage you to consider joining my program. It helps couples just like you find a lot more joy and relief, freedom in your marriage. Or you can come to my retreat. My retreat will cover this topic in great detail and help you apply it in your relationship in one weekend. I encourage you to apply what I shared in the previous question just above. I have 100 things I can say about this in your situation too, but let me give you just a few additional ideas to consider. First is to remember that marriages are a system. Systems like homeostasis. Homeostasis is like, think about your thermostat. When it gets too hot, the air conditioner kicks on to cool it down. When it gets too cold, the heater kicks on to bring things up back into this tolerable zone where things are comfortable, right? Marriages are the system, and you're participating in a dynamic to keep things comfortable, but it may not necessarily be optimal for your relationship. In other words, I want you to know that you are both participating in a dynamic that is not conducive to an optimal, passionate marriage. Do you think you can pinpoint your pattern and your cycle? Think of cycles like a Ferris wheel, where it just goes around and around and around. And in what ways do you two step onto the Ferris wheel? A common example is the pattern of pursuer and distancer, which looks like it's the pattern in your marriage. He pursues, she resists and distances, and because she's resisting and distancing, he pursues even more, which makes her distance herself even more. And so this pattern goes around and around and around. And there's a way out of it. The key is to recognize your role in the pattern and interrupt it. I'd be happy to coach you through this dynamic after I get a few more details about you and your relationship. Resentment happens in a marriage when we think others are making choices for us that we don't like. The quickest way to get out of resentment is to remember that you always have a choice, and consider all your options and get behind a choice that is in line with your integrity and earns your own self-respect, even if it's not your first or favorite choice. Getting accurate and true information on the table and honestly addressing what's yours to address in your relationship is really important too. And ultimately, getting behind your choices is very important. More information about all of this that I just said is available in our Get Your Marriage On program that I highly encourage you to take a look at. This next question has to do with penis rings. She says, my husband and I are in our late 60s. We have been married 47 years and have a vibrant sex life. We have sex 2 to 4 times a week. We like to add variety to our sex life, and I'm wondering about penis rings. Can you tell me where I can get information on how to use them and what type to start with? I don't want to go to just any website. Are they beneficial and pleasurable for men? Thank you for all you do. I really enjoy your podcast. Great question. First, let's understand a few fundamentals. Erections in a man's body work by the body channeling more blood flow into the penis than blood flow leaving the penis. So because more blood is going in than coming out, so you get a beautiful, wonderful, long, hard erection. A penis ring is an elastic band that fits snugly around the base of the penis against the body. And it helps the body keep the blood flow into the penis by restricting the blood flow leaving the penis with that band around it. Penis rings are usually not a hindrance to sexual intercourse. They're usually not uncomfortable, and for most men, you can't really tell that they're there. In fact, you can even buy penis rings with a small vibrator attachment to it so that she gets some stimulation too at the same time. It's a win-win. They're relatively inexpensive. You can pick up a penis ring for $10, for sure under $20. I recommend you just buy a few and see what you like. Go for it. If you don't like it, it's okay. You don't have to use them again. There's no harm in trying it. Now your question is, websites that have information about it and where you can get more. I recommend a few Christian-friendly stores for buying things like this, and these are the stores that I buy things from. The first is called romanticblessings.com, and the second is called marrieddance.com. Both Married Dance and Romantic Blessings have lots of really helpful information about how to use their sex toys, and their descriptions are written in a very tasteful manner. There's no nudity, so it's a safe website to visit. Now, links to these two online stores that I just mentioned are in the Intimately Us app. So you open the app and you go to Discover, and then there's Products We Love. You go there and you'll see the links to Married Dance and Romantic Blessings there. And the reason why I mentioned the Intimately Us app is also in the app, I occasionally put in coupon codes so you can get additional savings for buying your sex toys from them. Okay, this next question is about where the husband only wants sex as long as he's the one initiating it. So this is what the wife wrote in to say. My husband and I have a great sex life when we actually have sex, which is not very often. My husband only wants to have sex if he initiates it. So I find myself waiting around until he is ready. If I initiate, he isn't into it at all. How can I initiate when I am desiring intimacy and having him be more receptive? Great question. So I'm curious here as to why he insists he's got to be the one to initiate. And why does he not have interest when you initiate? That would be a great piece of data to have that would help me better understand what's going on in your marriage. I would like to know, what would an honest conversation between the two of you go like? I'd like to have a little more detail. Let me give you a few possible angles of what I'm thinking about. I did a podcast episode number 168 with Bonnie Young a few months ago, and she talks about sharing power in a marriage. I wonder if he needs to always be in control because he's the one that wants to do all the initiating. In other words, sex has to be on his terms all the time. Why? Does this pattern of control show up in other areas of the marriage, such as finances, in-laws, parenting, how to spend free time, vacations, and so on? I'm also curious, are you willing to disrupt your patterns that you have as a couple for a little bit? Like, are you willing to go through a little bit of a rough patch if it means coming out stronger on the other end? Can you tolerate a little bit of discomfort while you both address this dynamic in your marriage? So here's another angle to consider. Perhaps he's resistant to your initiating because the energy you bring to him when you initiate comes across as neediness or validation-seeking behavior. It's not attractive when your spouse is initiating sex because it's a way for him or her to manage his or her mood. Another thought is he might be embarrassed about his ability to perform sexually. Some men, maybe a lot of men, think a lot about performance as a man sexually. And these ideas are handed to us from our society. You need to be a certain way, act a certain way. And if he feels caught off guard with someone initiating when he's not prepared to really get into his performance mode, then he feels like he's less of a man in the sexual act. That might be a possible angle that you can consider with him. Another angle, perhaps he just tends to be more responsive and you're more spontaneous. It's common to be in marriages where one person is the one that thinks about sex more often, initiates sex more often, and they tend to be more easily excited. That's the more spontaneous person, right? while the other person doesn't think about sex very often unless something sexual is happening. There needs to be stimulation first. That's more responsive, or your desire comes in response to something that's going on. So I wonder if he is responsive. Maybe you just climb on him and get something going. Or get yourself turned on while you're near him and see if you can invite some interest. Get something stimulating going first. By the way, we have many higher desire wives in our program that are finding help and support in navigating intimacy in their marriage. And you can check it out to see how it can help you dig deeper and get real answers and solutions for your marriage. Okay, here's the last question I want to address today. This is about a wife and husband who are frustrated that they have to use a vibrator in order for her to orgasm. This is what the husband wrote in to say. I have tried everything, touching, licking, to help her achieve orgasm without resorting to a vibe, but always end up using a vibe. Anything we're missing? We both would really like it to happen organically. It's frustrating. All right, my dear friends, I want you to know that there's absolutely no shame in using a vibrator. Heck, it's one of the best inventions ever. Just think, this invention has blessed millions of marriages that only a few generations ago, they would love to have this kind of a tool to help them get closer together in the bed, don't you think? This is an amazing invention, and I'm sure many wish they had more access to it. I want you to challenge yourself to think about how you're approaching sex and this vibrator as you think it's an obstacle. I want you to think about this differently. I think couples really miss the point when they make sex too goal-oriented. Now, orgasms, by the way, are really nice. And most of us need more orgasms in our life. I know you probably think you do. I'm not an orgasm hater at all, but chasing orgasms actually gets in the way of having an orgasm. It's because when we make it so outcome-oriented about this goal, it actually puts pressure on us, and that pressure creates anxiety within our body, and it works counter to the body's ability to relax enough to enjoy pleasure and to be stimulated, to be aroused, to have an orgasm. So you got to eliminate pressure and shoulds, and sex has to look a certain way. You got to get rid of that. Instead, what if you make pleasure and loving connection be the center of your sexy time? You'll get a whole lot of mileage and satisfaction out of your time together if you make pleasure the center. And you'll have a lot less frustration as a result too. And remember, orgasms are an involuntary response, kind of like a sneeze, right? When sexual stimulation reaches a certain threshold, your body has an orgasm. Vibrators, by the way, are very effective at quickly stimulating the sensitive nerves in a person's clitoris in a very pleasurable way. Women's bodies are built to respond to vibration in those certain ways. But it's not the only way a woman's body is built to receive pleasure. How you learn to arouse yourself to the point of orgasm, by the way, is a learned behavior. Your brain forms stronger neural pathways by repeating pleasurable motions over and over. The vibrator was an effective way for her brain to learn to get there. That being said, manual, oral, or penetrative sexual stimulation requires your wife to be a lot more aroused than she probably currently is now going into the sexual encounter. So, I want you to really focus on building arousal. Build arousal to a feverish high peak before attempting manual, oral, or penetrative stimulation. So, what can you do to build arousal? Here are some suggestions that I have. Dance together. Make time to just connect and talk emotionally. Get genuinely curious about each other. Write a love note or express appreciation for something your spouse did for you and make it a habit. Take care of chores early in the day, if possible, so that it's not a hindrance on your mind when you get into the bedroom. Once in a while, if you can afford it, get a sitter and go someplace quiet, safe, and secluded to have sex. Or, if your circumstances allow, send the kids to grandma's so you have a quiet evening to yourself without distractions. Turn on romantic music. Adjust the lighting in your room to something more romantic. Kiss each other tenderly and spend more time kissing than you do. Nibble the earlobes, passionately kiss each other's neck. Stroke the inner wrist, the inner thighs, the lower back. Take your time to really warm each other up. Maintain eye contact while you make love to each other. And as you stimulate her clitoris, remember to start from the outside of the labia first. Take your time and work your way slowly towards the center. Be bold and tease her sometimes. Switch things up. If you go for oral stimulation, gently kiss her labia first and slowly build up a rhythm that works for both of you. Let her take a turn to stimulate herself sometimes. Get in a position where he's kneeling by her or over her, and she can take his penis in her hands and rub the head of the penis against her own vulva so that she's more in control of the stimulation. If she's open to it, she can take time to practice having orgasms on her own without the use of a vibrator. This will help reinforce new patterns in her brain that she can then apply to learning how to incorporate this in sex with her husband in bed. Finally, I want to tell you to remember that how you reach an orgasm matters far less than what meanings you're creating from the sexual encounter. So you got to watch out for this. If sex is often about frustration or feeling let down or feeling inadequate or broken, that's not a meaning that's conducive to a great sex life. However, if the meanings you derive from your sexual encounters are always positive, they're about connection, they're about feeling loved, they're about enjoying arousal that feels so good, and you'll much more likely be wanting to engage sexually more often. So the meanings you're bringing to bed are very important. Great lovers learn that sexual arousal, pleasure, and orgasm are not the end in and of itself, but it's actually a means to an end. If you'd like more ideas or help in this area, check out our coaching program that's already helping hundreds have a better, more fulfilling sex life. Now, thank you for listening through to the end of this podcast. You've probably gained something out of this episode if you've listened this far. And if you have, the only thing I ask is if you'll please share this podcast with a married friend or leave a review. Recently, someone posted this podcast review. I love this podcast. I know whoever listens to this podcast will find the answers that they are searching for. Thank you for that review. We have a tradition on this podcast where if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts and then you hear your review read, all you need to do is email support@getyourmarriageon.com and I will personally send you a gift as a way of saying thank you. If you would like to do away with conflict about sex or work through your differences in sexual desire or libido gap in your marriage, I invite you to check out the Get Your Marriage On program, and all those details are on our website. Now, thank you, have a wonderful day, and I'll look forward to talking to you next Friday.